Believe it or not, Israel is heading to yet another election, a fourth in less than 2 years. The Knesset automatically dissolving itself after failing to agree on a budget by the midnight Tuesday deadline. The vote will be held on March 23rd of next year. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu blamed the deadlock on infighting within Benny Gantz's Blue and White Party, while the alternative Prime Minister Gantz put the onus on Netanyahu's corruption charges. Take a listen to the official announcement from Knesset Speaker Yariv Levin.
אני מוכרח לומר שלצערי הרב לא עלה בידינו כולנו למצוא מספיק מן המשותף כדי להימנע מסבב בחירות נוסף וכדי לאפשר לכנסת ה-23 ולחבריה לממש במלואו את המנדט שניתן לנו. אנחנו יוצאים כולנו למערכת בחירות לא פשוטה. אני קורא מכאן לכל אחת ואחד מאיתנו ולכל אחת ואחד מאזרחי ישראל להימנע מלהחריף את המתחים ולעשות כל שניתן כדי שמערכת הבחירות תתנהל ותסתיים באופן מסודר וללא גילויי אלימות.
Now let's go straight to the source and hear from Michal Cotler-Wunch, a member of Knesset from the Blue and White Party. Thank you, Michal, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so I have to start by asking, how on earth did we get here? Gantz and Netanyahu are blaming each other after 3 elections that all ended in deadlock. Why should anyone believe that this one will be any different?
That is such a good question. It's where we return to the sovereign, to the Israeli public, to enable us to create a functional government. After having created a unity government, which I'll say, the coalition agreement was really just a technical unity. I had hoped for much, much more, that we would be able to embark in a much more holistic way to what unity actually means, in the sense of, truth and reconciliation, that the internal resiliency of the Israeli societal fabric so much needs. But the coalition agreement was not upheld. So all the symptoms, including the budget, which just last week, we were told by Nigid Bank Israel, a budget is compulsory. It is the work plan with which the government needs to function. And it didn't take him, Amir Yaron, to tell us that. It is very clear that in order to create solutions in the face of the most difficult crisis, economic and health and societal crisis that Israel is facing, we need a budget. But the budget is just one symptom. There is legislation that is stuck, that is not advanced. For the improvement for the sake of all Olim, all Israeli citizens, very important legislation, stuck. More dysfunctionality, the inability to appoint very important appointees that are imperative for stability at a time of instability and always, whether it's police chief and so forth. So that dysfunctionality actually made it very clear that even the technical unity hasn't succeeded. And in that sense, we have no choice but to return to the sovereign, i.e. the people, to receive their vote and hopefully create a much more functioning government that can lead the country forward out of this crisis.
Michal, we are clearly in the middle of what might be the worst phase yet of a global pandemic. Our economy is on the brink of collapse. How can Israel afford this right now?
So as I said, it is the very reason that I supported entering the unity government is this crisis. At the time, we didn't know the extent of COVID-19 and how tremendous the impact would be on every level of society, economically, obviously health, and beyond. And how can it, I would rephrase it and say, we're basically forced to choose between 2 bad options. One bad option is election. A much worse option at this time. And it's all about responsibility. So the same responsibility that guided me in supporting this unity government has to still guide me. And that responsibility is fully indicative that a non-functional or a dysfunctional government is much worse than an election. At this time, I would flip the question and say, how can we not have a functioning government at this time in order to be able to extract the state of Israel, not only from this global pandemic, but really utilize and identify the opportunities alongside the tremendous challenges and propel Israel into its next 72 years in those long-term plans I was referring to, in holistic policy, in comprehensive and available guidelines for the state of Israel, for all of its ministries. And for that, you need a functioning government.
Okay, and I'm curious what your prediction is of what the election outcome might be.
So I'll tell you, I think we're in a process. I think the state of Israel, the miracle that is the state of Israel, the 72-year-old miracle that is the state of Israel, is in a process, in a democratic process, and in a process of identifying its own identity, I would say as Jewish and democratic, as based on the Declaration of Independence, upon which indigenous peoples returned to its ancestral homeland, promising equality to all of its minorities and citizens. All of that has to be looked at, and very many issues that actually have to be dealt with, which we have left sort of by the sidelines. I would say the urgent that has always cast aside the importance, whether it's issues of religion and state, or as I said, Jewish and democratic and what that means, and good governance and what that looks like, transparent long-term plans that I just spoke about, even and I say this not personally and not politically, but term limitations as part of good governance. These are issues that the 72-year-old state of Israel, young and old, has to begin looking at. That is what looks into the future. And so saying that we are in that process, as we are, it's hard to tell what the very immediate next step will be. And Blue and White was surely a part of that process. But we are really in a constant motion, I hope, forward, and I'm a very hopeful person. So I hope we're in motion forward towards, resolving many of those issues. And if I say the founding fathers and mothers of this country laid down the physical infrastructure, it is our turn, our generation, that needs to lay the next level, the next tier of the infrastructure of this country for the next 72 years to be ensured and to be, successful.
Well, we'll have to wait until March to find out. Michal Cotler-Wunch, thank you so much.
Thank you.